Was it earlier on than that?
That was the first. I mean, we at that point we'd only written the one song,
Oh,
um,
all
and
right.
then we started talking about, well, let's write some stuff. And then it said, oh, and by the way, look at this.
All
Here's
right.
these 2-inch masters, and
So we'll stop there, Sim, because I want you to be able to feel fresh when you actually tell the story for real. I just wanted to ask that.
no, that's it. You get one taker.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
That's
Thank you
it.
very much, folks. That was the
Thank you, thank you, and good night.
Good night. All right.
It's been great, guys.
Yeah, we got 2 shows. We'll be right back.
The matinee's better, folks. Hey everybody, Kirk McCaleb here, and I want to welcome you to this episode of So That Happened, stories from the Sacramento 80s music scene. I'm joined here by 2 very special guests, Mr. David MacNeill and Mr. Don Hawkins from Internal Affairs. Hey guys, welcome. How are you today?
Doing great.
Now, I know, David, you're in Boise. Don, where are you residing nowadays?
I live in Spokane, Washington. It's in the eastern part of the state.
Very good. Very good. I want to give a very special shout out to these gentlemen here because from the very beginning, they have been instrumental in helping me to create some very special music for this project and for this docu-series. The bumper music there that was in the intro, that was actually done by, I think you guys did that back in the 80s. Was
That
it
was from 1983.
It was slated for to be on the album and just never made it, or?
Actually, it's the intro to one of the songs, the instrumental intro to one of the songs that I thought would be a perfect fit because it's just got that 80s push to it with the guitars and the synths on equal footing.
Yeah,
which was really what we were all about. Sort of I think they call that synth wave now, but I'm not really sure. But it was just what pop music sounded like then. The synths were right up there with the guitars, and that's from one of the songs that is on.
Oh, here we go. Aha, yeah. And
The
we're gonna
Lost
get into that,
Record,
the Lost Record. Yeah.
which we released just about a year ago. We found the old tapes and made the record. Finally released the record that we made in 1983 and never got off the tape.
And we're going to get into that as we go into this episode. But again, I will. Oh, and by the way, in the trailer, everybody, if you hear that really nice, cool DJ type voice for the voiceover, well, that was David. So
Well, that'll be me.
there we go. See. So anyway, and then
It wasn't me.
No, Don, we've got a special voiceover for you when I do my Mickey.
I'm Lil Donnie.
Yeah, exactly.
Well done.
So David and Don have also written some music for me that's going to be, I'm going to highlight in another episode, and it's specifically a song that is kind of a theme song for this whole project. It's called It's About Time, which is basically what this is all about. It's about time we all talked about and celebrated the 1980 music scene in Sacramento. So I want to play a little snippet of that song right now, and then later on, I'm going to be doing a special project with that song. So let's take a listen to that right now.
Looking back on what we had, the trials and the celebrations, the promise of potential, and the weight of expectation. It's about time, and all it can do. It's about time to people like me and you. It's about time. There's no reason around. It's about time.
Love it, guys. Absolutely love it. Thank you so much. So,
You're very welcome. Thank you for you planting the seed for that one, Kirk. It was your.
Yeah, I came up with the concept and a chord structure, but then I said, "Run with it, guys," and they did. And so I'm very happy about.
Well, that makes you an honorary member of Hawkins MacNeill. So it's Hawkins MacNeill
and
McCaleb.
There we go.
And by the way, your dues are a little bit late.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot.
Are you in the club or are you out of the club?
If you're only honorary, we'll give you a half off. How's that?
I love it. Thank you. So, David, you and I spent an afternoon together when you came down here to Sacramento, and I did an interview, and we're going to show some of that in this interview. You were
Hmm.
doing a special project for a friend of yours, so I kind of got a little bit of a backstory on how you came into music, and then and became acquainted with Don. But Don, I want to kind of start with you and give
Okay.
me an overview of how did you get involved in music and how did you come to know David and start Internal Affairs?
Well, it goes way back, but both my parents were entertainers, and in fact, my sisters and brother, they're all have either done music theater or some sort of art that way. So I was kind of born into it. Got in my first band when I was 12, playing drums. Started on drums, as so many of us do.
Like me, yeah.
Yeah, and here's a little anecdote. The bass player in that band was a young man named Miles Robinson, and he's currently the drummer in the touring band of the Fifth Dimension. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, he he always said, "I'm a better drummer than you." I said, "Yeah, but they're my drums." So it was like that's how it was when you were kids, right? It's
Right.
like if you brought the ball and the bat, you got to play whatever position you wanted. Anyway, my first serious band was a kind of a prog rock thing called Cypress. Started out with some high school buddies around the McClatchy High scene there, and we we got a little bit of label interest. We got courted by a guy named Bud Carr, who was the manager of Kansas way back in the day, but ultimately nothing came of that. And that was in the late 70s. The decade of the 80s, I was counting it down. I was actually in 5 bands. The very first band was called the 80s. And I have some some posters and things I'll send to you.
Oh, excellent.
The second band was called Flex, because in those days it was hard to get gigs. I mean, both Cypress and the 80s were all original. I mean, I was just trying to write and break through, and you couldn't get as many gigs. There were, I mean, God bless people like Larry Gosh and the Rutabaga Boogie Band. They let us open for them at Oasis a bunch of times, and other bands would say, "Yeah, sure, you guys are good." I mean, I don't know how you're going to get a gig, but if you could play Jesse's Girl again, maybe you would. But so then Flex was kind of an attempt to do that, to just get out and play. So for about a year, we just gigged and played covers and lots of groovy stuff, which was fun and a lot of good experience. But that kind of fell apart, and then I was kind of like, well, I guess maybe music's done. But I mean, the true story is there was a woman involved in this who shall remain nameless, but she actually compiled a group of boyfriends unbeknownst to us. I think maybe she even knew what she was doing. That originally it was called Johnny Quest, and they were practicing at my mom's house, which was a garage on Markham Way there that was pretty infamous, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting in listening, and I kind of was like, well, these guys are good. And I kind of inserted myself into that arrangement. So that's when I met Dave. That would have been in 81-ish, I suppose, maybe, it was early
That
80s.
sounds right to me. Yeah.
I started playing guitar at 13 because I went to at high school. I met a guy and he walked around. It was a free school back in those days, where we kind of wandered around, very very hippie, very very late 60s. He was wandering around. He was a year older, a fellow from Chicago, great guitar player, and he needed somebody to play rhythm for him because he was teaching himself how to play lead. So I said, I'll do it. And my mom bought me a guitar, and the die was cast. Um, I had already been listening to the radio, enjoying the pop music of the day and country music. Always loved country music. Um, One thing led to another, and my best friend, whose house we are in right now, uh, his older brother, about 6 years older, a fellow named Chris Brown, was a serious songwriter and also a world traveler. And I lived just around the corner from him, and I used to hang out with him, and I watched what he was doing, and I kind of thought, I would like to do this. I would like to write. I think I can write songs. Was always good with words. And as it turns out, we found 7 of his original reel-to-reel tapes that from 1977, 1976, 1977, and a little bit in 1978. Found them in a loft, and we found a machine that is compatible to 4-track recording, and it's all of this stuff. He has since left this earth, and we have spent the week digitizing this stuff so that I can take it into my studio and turn it into an album for family and friends. And distribution. I'm going to get the copyrights for his widow and his children,
That's great.
and that's the reason why I'm in town. Here's the work in progress, and it's been going very well. We're essentially done. Just doing some tidying up. I'm having to check through everything we've done. 7 reels is roughly probably 8.5 hours of music. But it's turned out really well, and it's nice to come back around and my help my mentor and his children have a legacy. And the interesting thing is that these tapes contain things that none of us have ever heard. We're discovering complete songs that are just fantastic that he did. And young me is playing guitar on some of them, and even singing on some of them. But this has been a real journey. And there were times when my friend and I, his brother, Chris's brother, were here fighting back tears. It's like hearing this. It's like he's in the room. It's been a very moving experience, and the family's very supportive. And we're going to have a giant party, a coming out party in May. Yes.
Yeah.
Just coming back here after I only come back once or twice a year. I live in Boise now. My family lives in Boise, but when I come back, this always feels like home. No other place I've ever lived has ever felt like home. And I've lived in some nice places, but coming here, I feel my shoulders drop, and Sacramento has a unique smell.
Yeah.
It has a feel, and the humidity. I just feel like I never left. I love this place.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And my peak experience here really was basically 1983. I was king of the world. It was a different time, beautiful time. So much creativity, so many great musicians. Not a lot of rivalry. The business hadn't invaded things yet. It was wide open. Everybody played in everybody else's band. Everybody else went to everybody else's shows. We were helping other bands put up their posters back in the day when you put up posters. I was the poster maker. I learned how to do it, which ultimately turned out to be a side gig. I'd learned graphic arts by making band posters.
Yeah.
So a lot of everything that I am today started here in the early 80s. As far as internal affairs, we started off at about 1980. I had been writing songs. I've been working at a local music store. The people that I were working with and I would get together after hours, sometimes with the manager's blessing and sometimes not. But I was assistant manager and I had the key. And we borrowed the equipment and bring in tape recorders, and we would started working on my first set of songs. That morphed into a band called Johnny Quest, which lasted about a year, and I met Don Hawkins.
Yeah, that's when we were had really got rolling.
Yeah,
Yep.
and there was some different personnel changes that we went through, obviously. I mean, originally Robert Kuhlman and a guy named Kirk Larson. Watson. Yeah, Kirk Watson was the bass player, and then Gordon Poe was the drummer, and then the changes came. But anyway, ultimately Johnny Quest morphed into Internal Affairs, and that's where that band that Dave held up the CD and we played. We were playing a lot of originals, and we were actually getting gigs because the scene in the early 80s, thanks, I think, especially to Charlie Peacock and a few others, but mostly Charlie really pioneered that whole scene. Of course, Bourgeois Tag came along, and they were kind of the bigger dogs in that situation. But so anyway, Internal Affairs.
Now you guys came out with an EP first, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have that there, Don?
I do. I have it right here. There are only 7 copies left that are actually sealed.
Very cool.
In the back. Look at those guys.
Look at those handsome guys. Now let's talk a little bit about the EP. And then you guys we were playing around. You finally got some gigs there, Don. What were some of your favorite places that you were playing at that time? Do you remember?
Geez, well, Malarkey's actually in the front room was always fun. I mean, it was like, how could this happen? They just quit out, dinner's over, move the tables, and you just sit up on the floor and play there. So
Yeah.
that was fun. I mean, the Oasis had played there in different bands, but that was good.
Fat
You got the list, the
Fonzie.
Fat Fonzies.
Yeah. That
I have
concert was great. It was a great place to kind of hone your chops. I remember I played there many, many times.
I think we played the
that-
China Wagon too.
China Wagon,
we
that was
played
on
the China
Broadway.
Wagon.
Yep.
Yeah, the famous China Wagon with Chinese food during the day, punk music at night.
Yeah.
Bitter
Crazy.
Creek Saloon.
Yeah,
Bitter
Bitter Creek
Creek.
Tavern, which became
yeah.
Spanky's. Yeah.
And then we did some out of town gigging as well. And so
when did Scott Moon and Mike Urbano join you guys? After Johnny Quest, obviously.
Well, Scott's in the Johnny Quest.
Okay.
Yeah, Scott was in Johnny Quest, and he was in the original Internal Affairs situation at that point. Well, I was playing bass in the original lineup.
Okay.
And trying to play bass and sing, and then, I mean, it started to become pretty evident that we were good. I mean, modestly speaking, we were good. I mean, it was getting better, and I thought, well, we could even be better if we had a real bass player. So, and we were having trouble with the drummer at the time. So Mike Urbano and Matt Dillon kind of came as a package deal. Scott was already there. And that's when I guess you'd say the classic lineup was established.
They were the rhythm section for a popular funk band in town called Odysseus.
Odysseus, yeah.
And I think they were ready to move on. I remember wooing them because it really looked like something's going to happen. And I got the impression that they were ready to move on to a different kind of music. Maybe they had burned out. We never really got into it because when they jumped in 150%. Absolutely the best rhythm section I have ever heard in my life, ever played behind. If you've ever been on a sailboat and hoisted the spinnaker and suddenly you're going 4 knots faster than you were before, there's this feeling of being pulled forward. And that's what playing with those guys was like. Just exhilarating.
Makes a big difference when you've got that solid rhythm section. So
they were amazing.
Now, when you guys were writing music during that time, were you trying to write a specific way, or did it just come out that way from your influences and your technical skills? Was it on purpose or just natural?
Well, some of the stuff I had started the band Johnny Quest, and I brought a bunch of my own originals, and it was your basic pop rock. With a lot of synthesizer and a lot of heavy guitar. I was a guitar hero in those days. And so when Don joined, I didn't really know very much about what he was doing before that. We were both into prog before, but the prog influence didn't really enter into the more. We were more like the Cars than we were like Genesis or Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And I think Don would, and correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but he started writing in that vein. And so the two of us just started writing back and forth in those songs. We weren't writing together, but we were absolutely arranging together and singing on each other's songs.
Yeah, I mean,
It
that's
just seemed to be a sound that just happened.
we're both children of the Beatles, essentially, and or most of us. And so, since they wrote all the good songs before we even really picked up our instruments, it's like, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to ever top that? But then, when again I heard these guys and thought, hey, this is good, and I certainly, it wasn't foreign to me. It wasn't like unnatural to write pop songs, to write short, 3-minute songs, trying to find hooks and this and that. It was always there. Just at that point, I wasn't sure I was going to be any good at it, but evidently, some of them turned out well.
It was a
Well,
risk just deciding to be an all original band. In those days, people's minds were much more open to that sort of thing. And again, I think you're right, Don. Charlie Peacock really opened up that venue. I don't remember Charlie ever playing a cover, and they did very well.
yeah.
And we thought if they
He
could
did a
get
pretty
Ricky,
ripping version of Allison, the Elvis Costello song, that's for
oh,
sure.
right, that's right. That's right.
All this.
Yeah. And then
But
Mark
it was
Herzig
definitely
sang,
DIY. All the people around us were very supportive, and there were lots of venues that were ready to take a risk on us. And when the people started really showing up, it just snowballed. But you're right. We had to pretty much invent everything on our own. It was not a big. It was a much smaller town then than it is now, but the scene was strong, and there was lots of support.
Yeah. And everybody seemed to support each other fairly well. There was rivalries. You and I talked about, you guys had a rivalry with the features and back and forth, and but everybody was pretty good natured about it, and they would allow people to play with them, and to me it was a fun time. So
It was the best. It was the best of times.
now, do you guys remember flyers, creating the
oh yeah,
flyers and putting them up? Well, tell me your guys' adventures with flyers.
uh, when Gordon, our drummer, left the band, he was the one who knew how to do the letraset letters. This was way before desktop publishing. And so they actually had to do it all by hand and then go to the print shop and print them all big and then do a million copies.
Yeah.
He showed me how to do it, gave me all the stuff because he was pretty much fed up with gigging and the whole band thing, and handed it over to me. And that was really that ended up becoming a sort of one of my many careers through my life. I ended up being a graphic artist, ultimately ended up doing whole magazines and ending up an editor-in-chief of 2 technology magazines, all because of Gordon's generosity in showing me how to do it. But I did all the posters.
Very cool. And well, I'm going to be showing some of the
recall.
posters here right now. See some of these posters right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
right here and right now.
Right now, right here. All right. So, hey, everything's going good. You've got this EP out. Now you're moving into, let's actually do an album. Talk about how that came about, and then where you did the album, and then subsequently what happened from there.
Well, okay, so kudos to David Houston and Stephen Holsapple. We've been playing, and they heard something they liked and said, okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do, guys. We'll give you a free day. You show up on a Saturday and set up and play, and we'll get as far as we can get. And we had been playing a lot, so we were pretty tight. We moved Dave's guitar out into the hall. I think my guitar ended up in one of the vocal booths. The drums, of course, were there. We found places. This is in the bigger moon. I don't know if you know the evolution of moon, but anyway, this is the bigger moon.
Okay.
And so we started and just ran through our entire set, and then maybe took a break. And I think we went back and overdubbed some vocals and this and that. And there was actually more songs recorded that day than made it onto the album. But because of, I believe later on, I went back in and I needed some tapes. So I kind of commandeered one of the reels and may have either erased or at least made unusable some of the other songs. But but that's how we got the recording done.
I think we did 15. I think we did 15 or 16 songs.
Everything's going good. You spent a whole great day in the studio. You had some great material. You guys are obviously tight because you were able to record all those songs and probably just a few takes. But then, Don, what happened after that?
As often happens in, success means people start saying, oh, look, these guys are good. And, we will never know the whole story, but there was some internal affairs inside the band, some disagreements that were starting to fester a little bit, and
there were some serious changes that happened. We were in a bit of a lull. I think we were concentrating on writing, kind of took our eyes off the ball a little bit. Bourgeois Tag, another band, was forming, and Bourgeois Tag basically stole our drummer and our keyboard player and upset the apple cart pretty dramatically. We were such a perfectly gelled unit that I'm not sure we ever really fully recovered from that. I'm through being angry about it. I understand why they would want those guys. They were great. And they went on to some success, got produced by Todd Rundgren and had a hit. They did very well for themselves, but that was pretty much the end of internal affairs. I decided to take a break, and I went off into a completely different line of work. Joined the Air Force, came back and got into tech writing, and I became a tech journalist, ultimately a magazine editor-in-chief.
at that point in time, I can speak for myself, and I think Matt and a couple others, it's like we were pretty shocked. It's like, Dave, wait, hold on, you're kind of overreacting to the Air Force. I mean, I can see it joining a country band, but not the Air Force. That's.
I ended up doing both.
All things can happen. So obviously, I mean, yeah, that is a common thread and theme that happens with bands. We've seen it with some of the best bands in the world. Look at the ongoing feud of Pink Floyd. I mean, one of my very favorite bands of all times, and yet they still hate each other.
There was a situation then later on Facebook where saw some things, and I was like, well, how's Dave doing? Asking another guy, Bob Cheevers, we'll go ahead and say who it was, and a couple others, and they said, oh, he's down in Boise doing this and that. So, well, give me his number. So I started trying to reach out, and then Dave sent me a song that he'd written, and that we finished it together. This is like, what do you think, Dave? We've tried to figure out if that was the 2012. I mean, it's been a while.
4 or 5.
Yeah, it was back there a while, but that was the first thing we'd actually written together, technically, ever.
Oh, it actually would have had to been 2000. It would have had to been 2007 or 2008, because we moved to Boise in 2007, and I know I was in Boise when I sent you the song.
Yeah, so we did that, and then long story short, I just reached out, and we started talking on the phone, and catching up, setting aside repairing some of the damage that our relationship had gone through over the years from various band breakups, and there's a lot of history.
Of course. Yep.
Again, there's an unnamed woman involved that it's kind of nothing no one that we ever fought over. We had our involvement with her at 2 totally different times, but it did kind of I think color, maybe even cement our relationship quite a bit.
She was quite the muse. She had an eye for bright young musicians. But there's a lot of friction involved in those days, and she's one of those people that's really hard to leave, really hard.
So
she's
that would bring
inspired between us 100 songs.
Wow,
that would bring us to the fateful night, I guess, or the conversation we had. And I said, well, hold on, let me look over here, and I found these tapes, and I said, oh yeah, and so
now these are big 10-inch.
Let's talk about those tapes. They're not just little cassette tapes. You found reel-to-reel tapes, correct?
Correct. They're 2-inch, I think they're 3M, but 2-inch 16-track tapes, because David Houston was running a 16-track machine at that time. So
I think they're Ampex actually, but there were 2 of them, and then we had a bunch of.
No, they were 3M.
You see, we
don't get me started.
We're very competitive.
That's great.
Yeah, and then we also had the masters that were mastered onto 1/4-inch tape, which were for the EP and for other recordings that we had done at Moon. Basically, everything we had done at Moon, and Donna had them all.
So you found them, and then could you use them right away? Or because this is going to go out to other people that don't know anything about the recording process. They know about pushing a button and all of a sudden it's there. We're talking about a whole different era, folks. This is where, you recorded on tape, and there wasn't any, if you wanted to erase something, it wasn't as easy, and editing wasn't as easy. So
Yeah, you haven't lived until you've watched your engineer take a razor blade to your hard work and say, well,
right?
you know what? We're going to edit that bridge right there.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, you couldn't use these tapes right away, right? What did you have to do in order to be able to even listen and digitize this stuff?
There is one lab in the United States, it's in New Jersey, that maintains all the old multi-track machines from back in the day. And that was the place you had to send it. And as I recall, it took a better part of a year for the whole process to go through for them. They digitize it, each individual track, and hand it and send it to you in these enormous, extremely high resolution files. And they brought them all into my studio, and I reassembled everything, remixed and remastered everything. It was expensive. It was $1,000.
And before they actually could digitize it, don't they have to bake it? Okay.
They have to bake it because the old reels, what happens is after they've been stuck together so long and heated and cooled. Unfortunately, if these hadn't been in Sacramento, which is a relatively temperate climate, they might not have even survived the 40 years.
Wow.
As it was, they did have to bake them. It's a slow heating process that allows the tape to kind of pull itself back together. Otherwise, what happens is that the oxides on the tape substrate will migrate and magnetize the tape that's next to them. But yeah, I'm sure it was a laborious process, and we coughed up the $1,000 and waited all those months. But when we finally got them, they sounded like nothing, like 40 years had not passed.
That's
They
awesome.
were as crisp and beautiful, better than anything we'd ever heard, because all we never had vinyl for the internal
Yeah,
affairs
I
stuff.
mean, I'm
John
sure
Phillips, John West stuff.
everybody who's doing it, when you got done with your session, you just burn a quick cassette.
Yes,
Make me one so I listen to it.
Yep.
If those of us lucky enough to have cassette players in our cars, some of
Right.
us had to actually go home and
Yep.
plug it in. But yeah,
That's great. So you guys remastered, then you spent time actually remastering it. And then at that point, did you guys go, wow, I mean, maybe we should re-release this?
Yeah.
oh yeah,
And we did.
I mean,
And where can we find it now?
Bandcamp.
Bandcamp
Yeah,
and Tower Records.
and Tower Records. Really? Are they
Yes.
reopening Tower Records?
It used to be there.
Yeah, no, it's there. You can, Rick DePrado has our EP at his what was this called, River Breeze, his store down there in the
Delta
South
Breeze.
Sac.
Yeah,
Delta Breeze, that's right.
I just interviewed him a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, Rick has got it. He works there. I guess another friend of mine named Randy Worman was there. I don't know if he still is. And
There are fewer
Find it
than
on
10
Bandcamp?
sealed copies left, and we have them offered for sale on Bandcamp. And we have a few, and I'm sending you one, Kirk. So now there's probably 9.
Now there's 9.
But now that we have all that stuff on CD, and it
Right.
actually sounds better. I'd rather that people bought the CD or just bought the downloads or just streamed it from Bandcamp. All of it's there.
Very good. And then
Internal Affairs, 1983.
awesome. And then now you guys have written obviously together for now how many years? 3, 4 years? Since discovering those tapes, you decided to form as Hawkins MacNeill, and you've written 3, 4 CDs, correct?
We've released 3 CDs and 2 solo albums that we both contributed to. We turned out to be very, very, very productive and efficient. I mean, both of us are retired. We still have family responsibilities, but we were just a house on fire coming out of the gate, and we almost couldn't get them recorded and fast enough before we moved on to the next song. At some points, we would have 4 songs in the works at the same time, and it's kind of funny. They'd all jumble together in your mind. Sometimes that actually worked to the advantage because it was chaotic and interesting things happened. But we have two more, at least two more in the can ready to release. We just don't want to release them all at once. And we're still continuing to write. We've slowed a little bit. We're probably down to about one a week, where before it was closer to three. And then I'm talking about completed, recorded, and in most cases, near almost mastered,
And
ready to go.
I can attest to that, because when I gave you the little germ of a seed of an idea for It's About Time, I mean, you guys had that back to me within just
It was 48 hours.
yeah, it was amazing. So,
Yeah.
Don, talk a
Yes, sir.
little bit then about how does this now, both of you guys, but let's start with Don. How does this make you feel now, knowing the disappointment that happened back in the 80s, and then you had to wait 40 years, but now you've got this newfound relationship that obviously is very, very productive. Talk a little bit about that and how that makes you feel now.
The one word answer would be grateful. It's been really rewarding. I mean, I think for Dave and I both, we're gonna do music no matter what. I mean, we're the kind of guys that, no matter if there's a guitar around, we're gonna play it. There's a song to write, we're gonna write it. But the fact that we've been able to get together and do it, I mean, the collaboration thing, you get better. I guess the sum is bigger than the individual parts, kind of thing, And so, yeah, it's been for both of us, I think, but for me especially to have things to work on. It's ain't nothing better.
So many of the songs that we've done are something that neither one of us would ever have been able to come up with individually. And there's a melding where you can't take full control, just like no one can take full control in a marriage for it to be balanced. But what you end up with is a third entity. And Don and I have that. We're very fortunate and lucky to have that. And I couldn't be more grateful. It effectively saved my life.
Awesome. Yeah, that actually make a very good album, The Third Thing, huh?
And I like that painting behind you.
Oh,
Come on.
this one
Wait,
right-
wait a minute. Quick, grab your guitars. Everybody go to your instruments now. We got to do this.
All right, here we go.
Wait, not all guitars.
The third thing.
All right.
There we go. We just wrote a song. Sorry.
Maybe I've created a monster here. I don't know.
Well, hey, let's back up just a little bit. Yesterday when we were doing our rehearsal for this whole shenanigan, we talked a little bit about how your mom's house was a mecca for other bands to rehearse in. Talk a little bit about that, Don, and how did that come about?
Well, as previously mentioned, my folks were both entertainers. My dad passed away when I was still a teenager. But my mom, I mean, God bless her, she was as supportive of the music scene, and she's one of the unsung heroes. She let me, at that time, take over the garage. At the band I was in at Cypress, we remodeled it to the point where we put soundproofing in the best we could and did all this and that. And so she let us practice there, and she ran interference in the neighborhood when people were saying it's so loud. Why are they? So the first band was Cypress. Other bands that practiced there regularly were Bourgeois Tag. They were there all the time. Of course, Internal Affairs, we were there. All Fell Down when I was there. Charlie Peacock had a few stints there. A version of Bob Cheever's band rehearsed there.
So is that house now a monument? Do we have like a monument out there for rock and roll?
Should be.
Should be, right?
I was back in Sacramento within the last 2 years, and the people across the street who are still live there, and it was also quite a fun party scene. My mom loved to host parties, and everybody's like, we're going to have a party, cook food, drink. They always had a cribbage game or poker or whatever. It was always cards going on. It was kind of like a crazy frat house. And I've had tons of people recently, and all of them have said, by the way, I saw you, really wanted to say your mom was so great. I talked to a guy that was in Cyprus yesterday and said, I've such fond memories of your mom. She was so supportive of all that.
She was.
Anyway, when I was down there the last time, I was talking to my neighbors across the street, and they said, well, Larry Tagg lives right there. And I said, where? Right there. I said, you're kidding. Yeah, he and his current wife bought the house next door to my mom's house.
Wow.
And then lo and behold, I'm standing on the front porch talking with these people across the street, and Larry and his wife come home from their grocery run. They're unloading the car, walking up, and I walk over and say, "Hi, Larry." And he was like, "What are you doing here?" Well, I said, "Did you know this was my mom's house? This is where Bourgeois Tag used to practice." And he honestly said, "You know, I knew it was around here somewhere. I didn't realize it was that house." So
Close. Wow.
yeah, but
Wow.
yeah, that was like, well, yep, here it is. It was talk about being full circle. But when I go back to Sacramento with my current wife and we drive around and it's like, oh, I used to play there. I used to play
Yeah.
there. Used to play there. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like I said, that's a beauty salon now. Yeah,
Right.
but it used to be a thriving club. That
Yeah.
is a parking lot now. It used to be a thriving club. You know, there was a building there once upon a time.
And I have been trying to go out and actually film a lot of these locations because of that very nature. That some of them are no longer there, some of them are other places, and we'll be featuring some of those clubs that used to be clubs in some of these episodes of this documentary. So
Yeah, ask how many of your interviewees actually went to Club Cantil when it was still a movie theater, the Esquire,
oh yeah,
and
well,
actually saw movies there as well as played music there. It's like,
yeah.
because I did. I
Did
happened to be one. When I was a kid, we used to go to a movie there occasionally.
Yeah, I've got
I saw 2001 there 13 times.
At
Really?
the Esquire, yeah.
The Esquire.
Yeah, when it came out, I went and saw it on opening day because I knew it was coming, and I went back 12 more times.
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and that explains a lot about what's wrong with me.
Yeah. If you saw it way too many times,
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Dave, it's all right,
Yeah.
Dave.
Oh, that's right, Dave.
It's all right, Dave.
With the
I'm
guitar.
sorry, Dave.
Something wonderful's happening, Dave.
Right.
So
I'm sorry, Don. I can't do that.
David, Don, thank you so much for your time today. This has been awesome. This is actually my first group Zoom call, so that hopefully we worked out a bunch of bugs that I won't have to deal with later on. Wait, no, that was just one of those bugs right there. So anyway, thank you guys so much. I'm looking forward to continuing our relationship musically together. And thank you so much for being on this episode of So That Happened.
So that happened.
So that happened.
so that happened.
Hey, that just happened.
The Sacramento 80s music scene.
We were there.
Hell yeah.
All right.